Hello my friends, and welcome to this guide to building HBS Shadowrun characters. I've loaded up Shadowrun Hong Kong here because it's the latest version of the HBS Shadowrun series, and I'm hoping that this guide will apply to all of their Shadowrun games. And so the story behind this guide is a simple one. I received this message on the first video of my Shadowrun's Return series, and it said, "I'm so happy you play Shadowrun, great game, though the mechanics are very unclear to me." And I said, "They don't explain anything, which is very annoying. By stats, you have no idea what they do. Maybe you could do some quick tutorial on how to build a reasonable character in this game." Sure, why not? Hold tight. So here's the thing. I was fully prepared to just go out onto the internet and find a great guide to building characters. But it doesn't exist. All of the guides that I have seen do not make any real mention of the mechanics whatsoever. And in fact, the mechanics seem to still be a black box for pretty much everybody, including me. However, I have a very strong working theory on how the mechanics work. And most other guides, they don't have any theory on how the mechanics work at all. They just tell you, oh yeah, this is a reasonable build, and this is a reasonable build, and this is a reasonable build. So it's like, it's a guide by conclusion, as in, they played this build and it worked, so therefore they put it in their guide. So before I explain how I think that the mechanics work, I'm going to explain why they don't explain the mechanics, or my reasoning as to why I think they don't explain the mechanics. And to do that, we're going to reach into a D&D example very quickly. It's important that you have the foundations of the house before we start building on it. So imagine a D&D situation where you have a character that has 10 wisdom, 20 intelligence, and 15 charisma, and you have a wisdom check. Now, in a basic system, the winner of the check is wisdom, because it's a wisdom check, so you have to use wisdom. I know this is a really obvious point, but this is built upon by both D&D and I think Shadowrun, so I'm just belaboring the point here. If you did a wisdom check in a game that didn't have any exceptions or amendments or any kind of it doesn't explore using relevant skills, it just sticks to exact checks, then here your check would be made against 10 because your wisdom is 10 and the check is wisdom. Now, most people have had a conversation with a dungeon master and said, yeah, my character is not very wise, however they could use their vast intelligence to say or do the thing that meets the wisdom check, or they could use their charisma to persuade the person giving the test to let them pass it. And this is called a relevant skills check. So you might have a skill that would also work that isn't the skill being requested, and that's a relevant skills check. So in this simple example of a relevant skills check, you would come out with a 20 intelligence, because if you're allowed to use intelligence and there's no penalty for doing so, then you would make the check at 20 rather than 10. So a relevant skills check has really helped you out here. But this leads to a problem, and that problem is that this really rewards building one skill and just trying to use it for everything, which can create a situation where a character not only never fails, but they perform well above the average or baseline characters that aren't built in such a metagamey way. So I think Shadowrun has a solution to both of these problems, which is the weighted relevant skills check. So let's talk about what that is. So here, this is the nearest relevant check which we just discussed, where the winner is intelligence. Now with weighted relevant, what you do is you assign a multiplier based on how relevant the skill is to the check. So in this case, wisdom is very relevant because it's a wisdom check, so we give 2 points for every point of wisdom. Intelligence is not very relevant, but is usable. So we give this an assignment of 1 point. And charisma, trying to persuade the guy giving us the wisdom check to pass us, is more relevant than intelligence, but less relevant than wisdom. It's obviously a wisdom check. So we've put this one at 1.5. Now with the weighted relevant check, you have created a situation where not only are you getting the same sort of result for every skill in this case, but counterintuitively, the winner of this check is charisma and not wisdom or intelligence like you might expect. And this kind of weighted relevant check solves a few problems. It basically means that it's difficult to get around not having the correct skill. So in this case, a wisdom of 10 produces a result of 20, which is very similar to our other checks. So we're not surpassing someone who is very wise in wisdom by shoehorning in another stat. We're being held almost to the same standard as our wisdom here by our other skills. But we still do get this kind of adjustment of, my character does have some very high relevant skills, so we can do a little bit better than we might do because the one thing that we're bad at is being checked. And it also creates this counterintuitive feeling because charisma turned out to be the best skill to use in this case, and that's probably not the one we were thinking about. We were thinking that our massive intelligence would allow us to solve the wisdom problem. But actually it turns out that the charisma skill is the winner. And it's this counterintuitive feeling that I think Shadowrun's character building system has as well. And I think it's for the same reasons. I think that Shadowrun uses, and in my testing it seems to follow, that it's using a nearest weighted relevant skill system with similar weighting. So if I change these to quickness, ranged combat, and rifle, then you'll see that we're moving towards this same idea. And you'll also see that here, in this case, if my intelligence was a bit higher, or my charisma was a bit higher, or my wisdom was a bit higher, all of them have the potential to push me up a little bit to increase my character's overall ability, but they also have the potential to not do anything. So for example, if I increase my intelligence by 1 here to 21, this only gets me a score of 21 in this check, which is still below my charisma. So I can invest a point in intelligence and not get any benefit from it. And I can invest a point in charisma and get a huge benefit from it if I know that charisma is currently my highest relevant weighted skill. But in Shadowrun, in HBS's Shadowrun, they don't tell you anything. They don't tell you any of the stats or even that this potentially is going on. So you can have no idea how to build a character. So let's explore how to build a good character, and then how I think it works. Okay, so whatever. Gender doesn't matter. Race mostly doesn't matter. The best race statistically is Troll, because you get a +1 to body, which is worth 3 karma, and a +1 to strength, which I think is worth 2 for 5 total. But it doesn't matter too much. And we're going to construct our own character here. None of this other stuff really matters. you know, you can play whichever race you feel most comfortable with. If you're going to go rifles, though, you probably want to play an elf. If you're going to go melee, you probably want to play a troll. Simply because they have bonuses in the relevant areas. Other than that, it doesn't really matter if you just like play just a generic human, but just know that your character will be slightly weaker for being a human than it would be if it were a troll or an elf. Dwarves have that willpower bonus, but I don't really rate chi casting, so that's just something you can do for fun. Okay, so let's get back to what I was saying about highest relevant. So you may have noticed that in my playthroughs, I go for the primary skill, and I just generally leave these ones alone for the most part until I really need them. And the reason why is because I think that the game is using weighted relevant, same as I explained with my D&D example. So what that means is quickness is like the general skill. So let's say that this is like intelligence in our example. In this example, this is like intelligence here. So you're gaining 1 point of ability for every point in it, let's say. And then ranged combat is like more specialized. So let's say you're getting 1.5 for each point of this. And then the actual weapon itself is extremely specialized, so you're getting 2 points for each one in that. However, the game is using whichever one is the highest, not your sum totals. So since this one is 9, obviously 1 times 9 is 9, and with ranged combat of 4 times 1.5, say, this is just an example to give you a feel for how this weighted relevance works. 4 times 1.5 would be 6, and then obviously just 1 in rifle is worth 2 points. So in this case we use our quickness for all of our checks because it's the highest one. Yeah, so this weighted relevance system is designed to even out your characters. You can go really high in quickness, but this is the least valuable of the 3. But if you then decide, well, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ranged combat as my primary, but it's held back by quickness, so you're having to pay twice for each point in it. And then likewise, rifle is, you're paying for this and this to get access to this. So each time the game is trying to push you towards doing this, because this is the only way that you can get this as high as it can go, and this is the most relevant skill, obviously, for rifles. This is the most relevant skill. So in this example here, 5 times 2 is 10, okay? And I've pretty much spent most of my points here, I won't get another one. Okay, so 5 times 2 is 10 in this system, but if I just built for quickness, and I would be able to get 10 if I was an elf, then 10 times 1 is 10. So if I build a perfectly average character, I get 10 points of relevance, let's say. I'm not assigning this to accuracy or damage or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain how the mechanics work. I get a score of 10, a character score, if you will. But if I just dumped all my points into quickness, I also get a score of 10. And so this is the clever balancing system behind this game, this weighted relevant idea. Which means that this feeling that, like, I don't know, let's say you built a character like this, and let's say you had it like this. And you built it like this because you wanted access to full auto, which is a brilliant ability, one of the best abilities in the game. So you built it like this. What you have done, you think, I'm being very clever. I'm metagaming the game because I've managed to get the best ability for rifles at the least cost, and then I can just focus on my quickness to get more hit chance and to get less chance to be hit, as per the tooltip. But this character that you've built here with these exact stats produces a character score of 6 here using our system. 3 times 1.5 is 4.5, and this is 3 times 2, which is also 6. So you have 6 here and you have 6 here. So either one of these would be used, but your result is still 6. So this is a system designed to anti-metagame effectively. However you build your character, it's going to prevent you from getting too powerful too quickly by using the highest relevant skill with some weighted adjustments. That is what I think is going on in the mechanics. Because in my Shadowrun Returns campaign, I built a strength character like this, and then at a later point I decided that I wanted cleave, which is a really nice multi-hit melee skill, and I was already very high in strength at that point. And when I bought melee weapons all the way up to cleave, I noticed something important, and that thing that I noticed was my accuracy did not improve, my damage did not improve, even though in the previous games it's described that choosing melee weapon skill increases your damage. But it didn't. It didn't increase my damage, it didn't increase my accuracy. They both seem to stay the same. The only thing I got out of the whole thing was cleave. But if you've ever built a character that's more like this, and then you start adding to melee weapons, you might notice a big increase in your accuracy and damage. And the only way that that is possible to happen, when it doesn't happen when your character is like this, is using weighted relevance. That's why I think this game uses weighted relevance mechanics. I haven't seen anyone else anywhere discussing the mechanics in this game, but that's what I think it uses, is weighted relevance. And weighted relevance is really hard to explain to laymen, because it's deeply game design territory, weighted relevance. And so any game that uses weighted relevance usually doesn't talk about it to anyone. They just leave it a mystery in the black box. Okay, so now we understand that. How do we build a character? Well, there are a couple of things that are worth dipping. So a dip is where you just get a particular thing. Like, for example, you could dip charisma just to get an etiquette, right? So that's a dip, where you just take a point in something irrelevant because you want the thing that it unlocks. Like, you might dip pistol to get the plus 15% chance to hit shot ability. So there are some powerful dips in the game, but mostly it's just about taking one stat and sticking with it. And that one stat should be a combat stat. Should be something that allows you to win fights. Because Shadowrun is a game of fights. Okay, so let's start with body. Body should be at least 3 to begin with. A ranged character should eventually take it to 5. A melee character should at minimum take it up to 8 over the course of the game. When you start the game, if you're ranged, you could start at 3, and if you're melee, start at 4 or thereabouts. The bottom line is, all body does is give you hit points. Hit points are necessary. Being killed in one hit sucks. Don't skimp on hit points. They do matter. If you're a ranged character, you can abuse cover, and that's why a 5 is something you can get away with. without too much trouble. If you're a melee character, you're going to struggle to use cover all the time, so taking it to 8 I feel is minimum territory. But obviously not immediately, you don't have to take all these points in body straight away. But the absolute minimum that I would start with is a 3. I would potentially say a 4 is where you want to go. It's up to you. If you're ranged, it's easier to live on 3 early on and go to 4 later, and then eventually up to the 5. If you're melee, starting with 3 is probably a really bad idea. I would go to at least 4 or 5 to begin with, because you can't use cover to protect yourself. The odds of being bursted down are quite high. Okay, so for now I'm going to leave this at 4. This is not optional. You need body. You're going to have a bad time if you don't take some. Cyberware affinity, you don't need to bother with it. This is unique to Hong Kong. The other games do not have it. It's just a way to get extra essence so you can install more cyberware. But you can install a really nice amount of cyberware without ever bothering with this. The only real reason to go for this is because you want the monofilament whip. In which case this cyberware affinity would be your trade skill for unarmed. Just don't bother. Don't bother with unarmed. Go with cyberware affinity instead. Okay, now there's one other dip that we should discuss before we carry on building our character, and it's this one. It's the totem dip. It costs 11 points. So the totem dip is better with ranged characters than it is for melee. And the two totems that were always up for consideration were bear and eagle. Bear heals the previous wound for all allies in an area around the bear. So basically, you can undo a grenade with this, or you can undo any kind of previous injury, critical hit from the whole team if you must. In Shadowrun, you take a hit. That hit counts, but is not confirmed. So you take the damage and you get a tag that says like wounded 20. So that is the hit that you took. It's not confirmed yet. And if you heal before another hit lands, that hit can be undone, can be unconfirmed, can be removed. And that's what this does. And this is very powerful at the beginning of the game, where hits are few and far between, and they often hit hard relative to your hit points. So like, you get hit for 10, that's may not be that hard in as the game goes on, but when you're starting a game, you've only got like 30 HP, that's a big hit. And you can undo those hits, and so it keeps you alive. And it's useful throughout the game. I mean, later in the game, you might take a big fat hit, 20 plus. Maybe it was a grenade that hit the whole team for 20 plus. You can undo that. So it's relevant throughout the whole game, but it's not quite as powerful in the long term as Eagle. In the previous games, this lasts for 3 turns instead of 2. They nerfed it, and it's still extremely powerful. And with a cooldown of only 1, you can sustain it forever if you so wish. It's 15% chance to hit. This combines amazingly with rifles, especially full auto, where getting a full chance to hit is very difficult. And so an extra 15% chance to hit on your full burst could result in some very serious extra damage. Rifles have a number of skills that have increased damage and reduced hit chance, and this offsets that as well. But it is in fact just good for any character that needs to land hits and struggles to get 90 plus hit rate naturally, which is true of most firearms. It is less true of melee, because melee ignores cover. because you can't cover from melee because the guy is stood right next to you. So, because melee ignores cover, this is less effective for a melee character. And so if you're going to dip for Totem and you're melee, you usually dip for Bear and not for Eagle. But Eagle is very good for ranged characters. So the question is as to whether you're going to dip for this at all. Now, Hong Kong has these passive totems as well. So usually the weakness of dipping for Totem is once you start installing a load of cyberware and start losing essence, the cooldown on those skills increases. They're still really useful even with longer cooldown, but they become less useful because your essence score plummets, and so the cooldown on using them increases massively, and so they become less useful over time, and so it becomes a question of whether you want them in the first place, because 11 karma is quite a bit of karma for a dip. But they added these passive ones in Hong Kong, and some of these are very good for a melee character. The Cobra is good for a rifle character that's going to dip cyberware because of the multi-hits, of course. The Boar is good for a melee character because an extra 15 HP could be the difference between life and death. However, I think the Fish just outperforms the Boar because it's minus 10% chance to be hit. That's extremely potent, especially for a melee character who's just trying to stay alive. And then of course you have here movement and armor. These are all very useful for melee. That's it for the passive ones. So you can consider taking one of these as well. I mean, it's up to you. They are good, but there is a cost. That cost is 11 karma, and that cost can eat into your highest relevant stat. Is what I want to say. So that's the decision you can make. But if you're going to make a melee character, Fish is probably a great one to pick. If you're eventually going to go cyberware as well on top. If you're going to go rifle, then Cobra is a great pick. Once again, once you plow a ton of cyberware on, it doesn't matter because there's no cooldown to this. Essence loss increases cooldown for spells, and these are passive skills, so there's no issue there. Okay, once you've decided whether you want to make your charisma dip or not, and the charisma dip, of course, also allows you. Let's say you do go for it. It also allows you to make an etiquette dip for 4 if you want. You know, once again, it's up to you, but that is costing you combat capability to do that. Now you need to decide whether you want to be ranged or melee. So if you want to be ranged and you want to be powerful, your real choice here is to go quickness and rifle. I would start like this. The only reason why you're taking these skills is to get your hands on this full auto, which is the most powerful rifle skill. I wouldn't bother putting any points in any of these or dipping for them. Just stick with rifle, because rifle solves all your problems. At short and medium range, rifle means machine gun, means fully automatic rifle, and you can just burst someone into the ground. And at long range, rifle means sniper rifle, and you can snipe them and do very, very solid damage without needing to invest in anything else. So, you know, as fun and interesting as pistol, SMG, and shotgun is, they're all much weaker than rifle, and I think that's still true in Hong Kong. It's more true in the other games because they hadn't sort of done anything to try and nerf rifles at that point. So if I was going to play a ranged character, this is how I would set them up to begin with. Then I would take this as soon as I get the opportunity, I would take this to unlock full auto, and I would carry on building my quickness until I can't build it anymore. Then I would build ranged combat until I can't build it anymore, and then I would build rifle. Obviously, I would also carry on building body. I may even dip for additional essence. In Hong Kong, in other games, this is not a choice. But in other games, there are cyberware setups that exactly fit the amount of essence that you get. So this is unnecessary anyway. Okay. See, the thing is, I'm just gonna say here, Shadowrun is a system that has economic balance. And because it has economic balance, many of these skills are not useful because you have a good economy in these games, so you don't have to make economic choices. Pistol is like the poor man's rifle. SMG is also like the poor man's rifle, except that SMG fills the role of the assault rifle, and pistol fills the role of the sniper rifle. Amusingly enough, pistols actually have solid range all the way out, and SMGs are more short range but high burst, and so these two aspects are actually combined in the rifle. And shotgun is obviously short range, is the master of short range, but it also has its own problems with spread and accuracy, and they're just generally a pain in the ass to use. But pistols are very inexpensive, SMGs are also modestly inexpensive, shotguns are like moderately expensive, and rifles and sniper rifles are really expensive. So there's economic balance in the character system, which means that in a Shadowrun campaign, in like a paper Shadowrun campaign, you might have wanted to build a team and just basically not being able to afford to outfit them all with, you know, top-end rifles. So you build characters to use pistols or other cheaper weapons, calmer intensive but money inexpensive setups. But that's not something you ever have to worry about in HBS Shadowrun, so you might as well just take the best thing, which is rifles. Unfortunately, this follows through for strength as well. Throwing weapons are cheap way of getting some ranged ability on a strength character. Unarmed, once again, is the cheap version of melee weapons, except, of course, when they start introducing cyberware, unarmed cyberware, then unarmed can become as dangerous as melee. Maybe even potentially more dangerous than melee, but the only thing about that is unarmed cyber weapons are expensive and they take up essence, and therefore you are losing essence for other bonuses you could have had while using a melee weapon. So you get the same issue. If you're building a melee character, it's almost the same thing. You just want to build strength, really. You can get some close combat, but I actually don't feel like it matters for a long time, or really at all. If you just pump strength, you will get both chance to hit and attack power together, and it will be more than sufficient. And you can just keep growing strength until you hit the cap, and you're actually forced to take points in close combat and melee weapons. And when you do that, you will find that there's a lull in your character's growth, where you hit, I think as a troll you hit like 12 or 13. It might be 12, and then you can get +1/+1 for 2 bits of cyberware and +1 more for a +1 stats coat or similar. It's different for each game, but basically you can get the last few from cyberware and other items. And so you no longer need to invest in strength, so you then start putting in close combat. And you find that when you start, let's just take this down for example, when you start putting in close combat, nothing happens to your character. You don't seem to gain any hit chance or attack power. Nothing seems to be happening, and that is because I think the game is using weighted relevant, and your strength is so high that it takes a while to build close combat up to where it's the highest for weighted relevant. But you got no choice because your strength will be capped, so You then need to move down to close combat if you want to carry on building. But this is a perfectly fine start for a melee character. You don't need to take either of these early on. You can obviously just use a melee weapon or use an unarmed weapon like knuckle dusters or whatever, and you'll get on perfectly fine. Okay, so what about intelligence? The way to do combat with intelligence is with drones. The problem is, it's very ability based. So the lower skill levels, even if they're not giving you stats, they are more often than not they're unlocking things. So if you go down the path of intelligence, you're going to find yourself basically having to do this. Something along these lines. And obviously you're going to want a deck, because that's the whole point. And it's going to be a struggle, basically. Combat-wise. In fact, I'd probably get the Class A drone equipment here. But you're gonna build sort of like this. This is more combat focused. And eventually you're gonna want to rise to 7 here so you can equip the top end drone. 6, at least 6 here for the +1 AP for drone bonus. I don't think there's enough points to go all the way up here, so just forget about it and just stick here. So you're probably going to go 7, 6 here. You're going to want to go up to 7 so that you can have the ultimate decking decking deck. But you'll only want to increase this as the decks become available. So early on, I think the Rinraku is going to be the highest that you can get. So you're probably going to want to go there. And that's it. You're gonna bring intelligence up to 7 so that you can unlock this and unlock this and unlock this. It is a powerful build. Even though it's very spread out, it is a powerful build because drones themselves are very, very, very powerful. And it's like having... It's sort of like having a couple of, decent but not fantastic characters on your team. Extra characters. Your main character, when they're controlling their drones, will just be sat there doing nothing. So you'll find a corner for them to sit in, and you'll sit them in that corner, and your drones will do all your work for you. It works. I have used it before. But just remember, Shadowrun is a game of combat. So you want to focus on your combat skill first before you start investing in like biotech, for example, which is kind of just a fluff skill that generally speaking is not going to do much for you. Same with ESP control. It's, it's to improve your programs, which are sort of like drones in the Matrix. But if your decking skill and your intelligence is high, then this is not going to matter. It's a solid build, but it's not the best build out there, but it can be the most lucrative because decking gives you access to a lot of like security systems, being able to turn enemy turrets on their owners, lots of data downloads that results in extra money and so on. So it can be fun to play, but it's more of an advanced class than either going quickness rifle or by going strength and melee. Willpower I never bother with. Frankly, I don't think chi casting is very powerful. I know some people make it work. They make it work by being some kind of blend of strength and willpower together to create a melee monster with usually like stride and killing hands together. The thing is, I would rather be stronger and more skillful and go cyberware for strength than be less strong and have to dump points into willpower to get the key casting abilities, which you also have to pay for. Like, once you've unlocked them, you gotta buy them too. Because it's very, very karma intensive, and if you do this, you can't get cyberware. I mean, you can get cyberware, but not very much before it backfires on you, and losing essence increases the cooldowns on your spells, basically. So, and causes other problems. So the synergy just isn't there. From a strictly game building, from a strictly, building for power, and not for fluff perspective, I don't think that this really works as a class. So I would skip willpower entirely and just leave it alone. But if you want to go for it, you can certainly dip for killing hands. You could even potentially dip for stride. It is a thing that you can do, but just be aware that once you get your cyberware, and you will want cyberware because it's a huge improvement for melee characters to get all that cyberware, the cooldowns for these abilities will be really high. And so you'll be able to use them a lot less, and you may regret taking them. But it can be done. I think a lot of advanced players play this kind of character just for fun. Not because it's good. But I'd love to hear your comments on this. I've never felt like this is a good path to take, if I'm completely honest. You get stuff like Mystic Armor, but is Mystic Armor just better? Is it better than just wearing good armor and having good cyberware that increases your resilience? That's the problem. And this is the point where this starts getting really expensive. Okay. Finally, there is Charisma. Charisma is the intelligence of magic, in that the way that you generally get stuff done with charisma is you summon spirits, but they are expensive. Let's just shove these in. Okay, so for example, if you were going to be charisma based, obviously you're going to dip for where is it? Nope. Okay, you're going to dip for Dove. Sorry, not going to dip. But you're going to take Dove as your totem to prevent your spirits from breaking away from you. And you're going to build one of these kind of spread out, averagey, same as with intelligence and drones. Instead, you are summoning spirits. And spirits can be really powerful. They can be more powerful than drones. You have the same kind of issue where your skills are spread out, but this can be an interesting class to play just because of the etiquettes that you get. I'm not like the hugest fan of conjuring. There are some nice-ish things in conjuring, but conjuring just basically allows you to create cover and walls. It's useful, but not... I don't think it's the kind of thing that's going to warp a fight in your favor, particularly. But a couple of powerful spirits can. The only issue is that you need tokens for spirit summoning, and they are consumable for the most part. I'm not sure if there are any permanent ones. So it's kind of like having more powerful drones. And you think, oh great, drones are really powerful. I had a drone character and it was really good. Yes, but the problem is, once your spirit tokens run out, then you're screwed. Not to put too fine a point on it. So if you don't know how many battles there are going to be until your next opportunity to buy some more, then you could find yourself in big trouble. And most of the attack skills in Charisma are not they're not fantastic. It has been a while since I played a Charisma character. You might be able to blend some willpower into... I think it's willpower you can blend into... cast some spells. To add some spell casting to your Charisma. So this would be your primary... Spirit control would be your primary way of getting things done. You can dip a little willpower to do some spell casting. Spellcasting is so it's things like Fireball and Acid Ball and all that kind of stuff. You can build for that, but it's weaker than just using a rifle. That's why I didn't spend much time on it. You're better off just using a real ranged class than building willpower for spellcasting. But when you don't have, because you're not going to go quickness and then ranged combat and then rifle on top of charisma. When you have no strong way of projecting firepower with your spare action points, then a little dip into willpower to get some offensive spells can be useful, because I'm pretty certain that the game will use your charisma. There is some... I think Acid Stream is in Conjuring as well, so actually you may not even need to dip Wisdom at all. You can probably dip Conjuring. There are some offensive spells in Conjuring, they're just not that great. But basically, if you're going to go Charisma, I would go Spirit Summoning, Spirit Control, and go down that route. Then you have really, really powerful summons that can get a lot done for you. You just got to be careful about when to use them. Don't use them for easy fights, save them for boss fights and so on, and then, when the situation gets really hairy, then it's time to pull out your high-level spirits and go ham. Just note that this is intensive on money, because they are consumables like grenades, and they cost a lot. So, just to confirm any missing points here, cyberware affinity is not necessary, but it's a nice add for unarmed melee builds. If you want to go down that route, you can dip for the monofilament whip. I never bother with dodge. Use cover. It honestly doesn't feel like it does very much. That feeling has persisted throughout all the games I've played where I've put some in and it doesn't seem to really matter. As discussed, pistols, SMGs and shotguns are poverty choices, but you don't have to make poverty choices in HBS Shadowrun, so there's no real need to bother with any of them. Rifles are just better. Take your pick between melee and unarmed, it's up to you, but melee is generally speaking better. Intelligence, you're going to get your combat done through drones, so that is what you need to build for, which means building up these in a very specific and general way. Wisdom, you can go for spellcasting, but spellcasting is just like inferior rifleman, so I mean, you can do it if you like spells. you like the look of spells, or you think that they add more utility, or you like setting people on fire and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that rifle just turns living person into dead person at great speed. So as fancy as magic is, I never bother with it, because it's the spellcasting is basically about projectiles that make living people dead people, and rifles do that way better, way faster. So why would you bother? Obviously, I talked a lot about key casting because there is a feeling amongst some people that this combined with an unarmed build is very strong, and it potentially could be, because Killing Hands and Stride are very good, so dipping for those might be worth it. But just remember, it clashes with cyberware, which you're probably going to want as a melee character. So I personally wouldn't bother. I would just write willpower off entirely. And charisma, you're going to get your work done through spirits. The only thing is, spirits are like drones. They're in many ways they're much better drones. They're more powerful than drones, but they are mostly given to you through consumables that are quite expensive. So you need to be good at your resource management if you're going to go down this path. But it's a very strong path. You can unlock a lot of interesting dialogue with it. You can go through with getting some conjuring, or by dipping willpower spellcasting to get some offensive ability with your spare action points, something to do with them while your spirits are going around killing everything for you. So plays much like drone. These are all hard classes. My final saying would be, if you're playing the game for the first time and you just want to be powerful, take a 4 in body. I think it's like a 7 in quickness, 3 in ranged. No, it's an 8 in quickness. 3 in ranged, 2 in rifle, and just go with that. Then pick up your final point in rifle for now, which will unlock full auto. You then may want to consider either getting your body up a little bit more, or dipping for totem and getting the +1 damage, +5% passive. Start adding in your cyberware, and then just carry on building your quickness. And when you can no longer build your quickness, build your ranged combat. And when you can no longer build your ranged combat, build your rifle. And just blast your way, through the game. Shouldn't be a problem. Just make sure you're behind cover at all times. Aim for any enemy that steps out of cover or is otherwise exposed. Full auto every chance you get. Stacking any targeting bonuses that you might have. And carry a sniper rifle with you, because it can be very useful for picking off enemies hiding at great distances away from you, especially with the +15% aimed shot, which doesn't make a lot of sense to use with the rifle, but makes a lot of sense to use with a sniper rifle, which comes under rifle. So you have your two choices there. And leave them alone. They're in my opinion, they're a waste of time. If you want to fiddle around with dodge and see if it makes any difference, you can. But I've never felt like it makes a huge difference in any of the games. I would love to know the exact mechanics of the game. But I get the feeling that your dodge chance is also using weighted relevant, which means that your quickness is determining some of your dodge chance. And so just having a really high quickness is more beneficial than trying to, do this. You're basically going to end up in the same place. Maybe you'll end up with slightly better dodge, but you'll miss out on hit chance, because quickness and strength seemingly improve hit chance, damage, and dodge all at the same time, from what I can tell. Maybe reducing damage is not true for strength, but I have felt like, especially in Dragonfall, I felt like that is the case. Anyway, that's everything I know about the game and its mechanics. I hope you find this helpful. I would love to hear your comments about anyone out there who actually knows exactly the mechanics of the game, but as far as my searching on the internet, nobody has unlocked the actual coded mechanics of the game. but I have a very, very, very strong feeling, and through my own tests and having beaten this game like about all the games together, I've probably beaten them 6, 7, 8 times. That it's using this weighted relevance, which means that getting a high basic skill is a very strong strategy, and just dip for the skills that you want, and that's it. So I've finished Shadowrun campaigns with a 3 in rifle, and that's it. That's as high as I've gone throughout the whole game. I've been a rifle character, and I've just had 3 in rifle from beginning to end, with as quickness as high as it will go, and then ranged combat reaching 7, 8, or 9 towards the end, and I'm just one-shotting, one-autoing enemies down instantly. I'm not sure that averaging out really helps you unless you're forced to, i.e. like with intelligence, where you're forced to average out because you need to unlock the drones and the extra AP for them. So in that case, you're forced to go 7, 7, 7, 6 if you want to be powerful. You just don't really have a choice in the matter. Do not, my final thing, do not generalize. Do not generalize at all. It doesn't make any sense in the Shadowrun system whatsoever. Build only to increase the power of whatever your main killing method of killing is. So, you know, if I'm going rifle build like this, I am not investing any points in strength, I'm not investing anything in intelligence, I'm not investing in willpower. I might dip for totem and charisma, that's it. I'm not investing anywhere else. My focus, my laser-like focus, is on this tree, and only this tree. Same is true for strength and anything else that I've talked about here. Do not generalize in this game. It only hurts you. That is it. I hope you enjoyed this guide and all my thoughts. Very wordy, but I hope it helps someone out there. Alright, see you in the next guide.